Great. Welcome everybody to the Priva Academy live training session. My name is Brianna Parker. I'm the marketing coordinator here at Priva North America. We want to thank all of you for your participation today. We encourage you to ask questions. Feel free to chime in if you have any comments as well. We've received a lot of good feedback from past live events, but we would love to hear from you if you have suggestions or topics that you'd like us to cover in the future as well. Thank you again for your interest and your attendance today. Today we'll be discussing Priva Office, covering the bases. Some of the topics that will be touched on include setting up alarms, graphs and user rules, as well as tools and tips and managing settings. There will be time for open questions. As I mentioned before, you're welcome to ask questions as Chris is going through the demonstration. But for anything that we didn't touch on, there will be time to have open discussions as well. Feel free to unmute and chime in or put your questions through the chat. And I'll be sure to work those into the training and have Chris answer those as well. I think we're all set to get started. This is Chris. He is a system consultant at Priva North America East. And Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Brianna. Like Brianna said, we're going to go over some Priva Office tips and tricks. I know it's kind of there's probably going to be some things that are pretty basic to a lot of people, but usually when I do these trainings, we find a lot of things here and there that people didn't know or have forgotten over time, and there's a lot of useful information in here. So I'm going to start off just by talking a little bit about the users and user roles. So I have a user set up for myself, and I'm sure all of you have done this before. We're going to log in using my username and password. Can hit enter. First thing that's going to show up for me is my active alarms pop-up. So what I can do at this screen is it's going to show me any new alarms that have shown up since the last time I logged in. It's going to indicate that with our red alarm image here. I can acknowledge the alarms individually here just by clicking here, or I can snooze them as well. So if I wanted to come in first thing in the morning, I look at my alarms and I say, hey, yeah, I'm going to deal with that in a little bit. I'm going to go get a coffee, deal with that in 30 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. You can snooze it. And what that'll do is it'll cause this pop-up alarm will come back up in whatever time you set. Or say if we can say, okay, yeah, I'm going to acknowledge all of these alarms, I can say all red, click here, and then I can close my pop-up window here, and it's going to go away. I'm going to direct everybody to the top left corner here. It shows 0 of 53. That means that there's 0 new alarms and there's 53 existing alarms. When I click on that alarm button, one note on the alarm button here, this is our demo system, so there's going to be lots of alarms here. It's not an actually working system, but for everybody, I recommend, we want to see a green alarm button here, meaning no alarms, because no alarms means that all of the alarms that come in after are important. They're dealt with immediately, and you don't kind of get that alarm fatigue sort of thing where you just have a bunch of alarms here and you tend to ignore them, because when you do get alarms that matter, you want to be able to deal with them and notice them right away. Once I go to the alarm screen here, there's going to be some information. It's going to show me all my alarms. So again, our 53 alarms here in our non-working system. It's going to show me some information here. So it's going to show when the alarm became active. So it's going to say a date and time. It's going to show me a computer. So if you have multiple CPCs or multiple systems at your location, it's going to show you where it is. It's going to give us an indicator on where the alarm is happening. So whether it's on the weather station, water system 3, compartment 1, and it's going to show us a short description of the alarm, and then it's going to show us a number too. With these alarms, each of them have the number here. If I get an alarm that I don't know how to deal with, I can hit the F1 key, and it's going to bring up our help manual. With the help manual, I can click on our alarm appendix, and then along the left-hand side here, it's going to show us all of the alarms that are possible in the system. So if I take an alarm, for example, and I say, let's look at alarm number 202 here. If I want some more information on that alarm, I can hit our F1. Then I can search for this alarm, alarm number 202. And if I open up the help manual here for it, it'll show me alarm 202, mixing valve defective. It's going to give us some more information here. So it's going to show enable mixing valve monitoring. Page I115.1 is set to yes, and the measured mixing valve temperature deviates too much from the desired valve temperature. It also gives us some things that the computer takes account of, whether the system's heating, cooling, etc. It's going to give us some possible causes. So this will help with troubleshooting, whether it's yourself doing it or if it's a maintenance team doing it. The mixing valve is stuck or mechanically defective, or the connection of the mixing valve is loose or there's a broken wire. And it's going to show you a result as well. So the heating network is used to humidify greenhouse air, incidence of disease maker, user action, please contact your Priva partner. And then it also gives our partners a little bit of help as well to troubleshoot the alarm. If I close that up, there's a couple things I can do on the alarm screen as well. We have a filter on alarm number page. So if I wanted to look at all the instances of that mixing valve defective alarm, I can type in the alarm number. So right now I have 2 that are active. If I get rid of that, I can also search by text. So if I wanted to look for, let's say, a temperature alarm, I can say here, and then everything with all of the instances of temp in there, it's going to show me. If I am troubleshooting alarm, again, that mixing valve defective alarm, and then I go to the actuator and I find out that the actuator is maybe broken and we have an order, an extra one on order, I can make a note here. I can save that note for the current alarm location. So if we just wanted to save it for compartment 1, we can save it for compartment 1. Or there's an option here to save for all alarm locations of this alarm. A good example for just the current alarm location, if I wanted to say mixing valve has been ordered, and I want to make a note for other users that are in the system, I can put a date on there, let's say. And then I can click save here, and it's going to save it just for that location. So I had another one down here, and that's in compartment 4. It's not going to save it for that one. If I wanted to make a note for all of those instances of that alarm, I can save it for all alarm locations. And I like to use this as kind of a reminder for troubleshooting. So we can go through and we can say, okay, anytime we get that alarm, check mixing valve, actuator, check wiring. And then when I save it for all alarm locations, if I click here, anytime that alarm comes up in the future, it's going to give any other users kind of a hint on how to deal with that alarm. I find that's kind of nice because then you can say, okay, yeah, any alarm that comes up, we'll put some tips on there for troubleshooting, and then we won't have to re-look up that alarm and see how to deal with it. If we look at the top right here, we have all historical alarms and messages. We can show messages or we can uncheck, and messages are going to be stuff like curtain active, curtain open. If we just wanted to look at alarms, we can uncheck that, say show. What it's going to do is it's going to show us a history of the alarms since the system was installed. If we say, okay, yeah, compartment 1, that's been kind of a trouble compartment with that mixing valve, we want to search and see how many instances of that alarm. Again, we can search by alarm number. It's going to show us all of the instances here. And then again, we can use the text filter, and then we can also search by date. So if we wanted to look at a specific range, then we can say, okay, only show me the alarms from this date to this date. Because then as you can see, 9 alarm pages here. If we wanted to zoom in on just kind of a select time period, then we can search that here.
Chris, we have a question asking if we can see where to find detailed alarm information once more.
Oh, sure. Yeah, just on the alarm page. So if you go to the alarm page and then hit F1, it'll come up here. So along the left-hand side, we'll have all of our alarms there. Again, this is going to be a pretty lengthy list, but of course, all the alarms that show up on your alarm page are only going to be applicable to the equipment that you have installed on site there. Another good segue to that question is the F1 button. That can be also used on any of the pages in Priva Office. The nice thing about using the F1 key is, say we're on our heating strategy page, so our I-110 page. If we hit the function key, function 1, it's going to bring up the help manual for that specific page. And then on the left-hand side here, it's going to be all the sub-pages here as well. So if we wanted to say, okay, I need an explanation on line 13, I can hit F1, brings up our page for I-110. And then we can see time cool down. So it's our desired delay per degree Celsius for the decrease in the set heating temperature. So it shows us all the information when that's taken into account and gives us lots of information here. Again, any other page. So if we go to our event page, type that in, F1, it's going to bring us straight to that event page. That is the number one thing in Priva Office that I use almost every day. Lots and lots of settings in the system, lots of stuff to remember. So if you have a setting that you haven't used in a while, you can hit F1, read a quick review of it, and then you're off and running. The first thing that I touched on when I logged in is I used my username and password. I wanted to do a quick note on user roles and users. So with your users, you can assign specific user accounts to each of the growers, maintenance, management, anybody that needs access to Priva Office. So if we wanted to add a new user, we can click add, and it's going to ask us some information here. So it's going to ask us for a username, full name, password. You can confirm the password, and then it's going to ask for a user role. What we can do with the user roles is if I go over to the user role screen, say I made a user role, I'm going to say maintenance. Put it as short here. And then say we want to make a user role for a maintenance team. They want to be able to log in, check alarms, check temperatures, but maybe not have access to change settings. We can do that. We can put a little description on. We can say read only for maintenance team. There's an authorization tab. So if we wanted to give them access to only certain computers in the system, we can do that here. Another nice thing we can do as well is we can click on the navigation menu editor page. What that'll do is it'll bring up our list of options for settings, overview pages, graphs, and custom screens. This list on our navigation menu editor is going to look similar to what we have on our left-hand side here on the Priva Office. In these menus, we can go through and we can see each of the pages that the user will have access to. So anything that's kind of in a black color like this, that's going to be accessible for that user. And anything that's gray is going to be hidden. So if we were looking at the vents, for example, we can highlight these and we can say, okay, we want to have the maintenance team have access to that. So we're going to uncheck that. It's going to show them all in black. So that means that the user is going to have access to that page. And then say, okay, yeah, we're going to have access to that page, but we want to have it read only. We can highlight those screens again, click read only, and then it's going to gray the little box out here. So once we save that, it's going to allow that user to be able to log in. And then they're going to be able to, we can actually do a user here. So then we can say save. I'm going to say OK. So here's our maintenance user. Then when I go into users, I'm going to say add. I'm going to make a username of test user. And then once I select that user role, I can log in as that user. And then when I go to my venting pages, all the settings are going to show up, but they're going to show up shaded gray like this. So the users can go in, they can see what the settings are, but they're not able to change anything. We can click on alarms as well, check the alarms, but in that particular situation, the user won't have any access to changing those settings. Just going to log back in here to mine. Another function that we have that shows up just below the alarm button when we have an active note is our notes function. Say we had a couple different growers that were responsible for certain sections in the greenhouse. We can click on our notes button here and we can make a note here. So if I wanted to make a note for Brianna to let her know that I changed settings for vents, the event temperature, what I can do is I can set a reminder, and then I can say, we'll get a reminder at 1:16. I can share with certain users in the system, and then I can click save. And then what I'm going to get under here, under our alarm button, is going to be a notes function. That way, when the next user logs in, they can come in, check the notes. I can see change settings for vent temperature. And then when I hit our time here of 1:16, that little notes button is going to start to flash, and it's going to say, okay, there's a reminder here. We need to check in. Then at 1:16, say I'm here. I can check in. I look, and then I say, okay, yeah, that person's reminded me. I can check the setting here, and then I'm able to erase it if I want to. Next thing I wanted to touch on is interfacing with the user screens. For example, if I go to our heating strategy, I'm sure day to day everybody's used these pages. To change a setting, all we need to do is click on the setting, type it in, and then click away, and then our settings changed. If I wanted to make a settings change for more than one compartment, what I can do is if I highlight over top of the setting, there's a little triangle in the top left corner. I can click on that, and it's going to bring up our advanced control. I can put my new setting in, and then say I wanted to copy it to one of the other sections. I can copy it. I can say selection here. I can change it to all compartments or all locations, whether it's a compartment or an autonomous control. Then I can say set, and it's going to make that setting for all of the selected compartments. If I have a bunch of different compartments that have similar crops in there that I want to use different settings, I can go through and make all my settings changes here. So say I wanted 16 for my heating temperature. I wanted to change my time cool down. I'm happy with this entire page and I wanted to copy this over to another page. What I can do is up on the top here on my toolbar, I can click copy. And what it's going to do is it's going to bring my entire page up. I can choose which settings I want to copy. So if I wanted to leave some out, I can uncheck them. I can, again, choose where I want to copy them to. Once I'm happy with that, I can say next. And it's going to bring me to a confirmation screen. So if it gives me a question mark, it's just telling me I need to verify that those settings have been changed. Then when I'm happy with all this, I can say start. It's going to change everything. Then I can click finish. And then my settings are copied over to that other page. There's a couple different types of controls that we'll interface with in Priva Office. So there's a number setting. Again, just click on it. Then you can type in your new setting. There is toggles. So any word values that I can select from, I can pull them down and select any of the options that show up here. So if I wanted to open up another period, my selections are on and off. If I say off, then I'm allowed to, or on, I'm allowed to select that. And it's going to bring up my settings for the next period. Another one that I have here is an influence table. If I want to use one of those, for example, my radiation to my heating adjustment, I can click on that. I can fill out my influence. So if I wanted to look at our watts per meter squared, I can type in an influence here and say I wanted to subtract off of my heating temperature for whatever reason. What the computer is going to do is it's going to fill out this graph for you. It's going to show you how that influence is going to impact your temperature. And then when you're happy with it, you can click OK, and you're good to go. You can tell which tables are being used. You can see the difference here. This one's empty, and then this one shows a little line here, and you're able to see that there is an influence being used there. Another type of setting that you interface with is a matrix. Anybody that has Connext, this will look familiar. In order to interface with these ones, you can just double click if you wanted to move valves to different valve groups in this situation. If you wanted to do a bunch at the same time, you can highlight, right click, and say set. If you wanted to clear some, you can do the same thing, clear. And then again, once you have your table filled out, nothing's going to be changed until you click OK here. If you make a bunch of changes here, and then you decide, yeah, I don't want to keep these settings, I can click cancel, and it goes back to how it normally was. Another nice feature, usually this is the one that growers really like to use, is we have a temporary settings function. Say I have a situation where I wanted to temporarily change my heating temperature. Again, I can click this little triangle on the top left corner, or I can right click and say advanced control. And then what I can do is I can say use temporary setting. I can type in a new setting, and then I can make it valid through to the next 24 hours. So if I said, okay, today I want to change my heating temperature to 18, and I want that to stay active until 6 o'clock, I can click here. Again, I have the ability to copy it if I want to. I can click set. And what it's going to do that setting, it's going to turn it blue. So anytime you're going through the pages here, you see that a setting's blue. I know that's a temporary setting. I can highlight over top. It's going to show me my original setting. It's going to show me my range, and it's going to show me my unit. When the time hits 6 o'clock, that setting is going to automatically change back to its original setting. That's a really nice one in case you want to change something. Of course, there's always so many things going on at once in a greenhouse. So if you happen to forget, maybe you get busy doing something else, then you can know that that'll change back automatically for you. If I wanted to get rid of that prematurely, say, okay, yeah, I changed my mind, or I'm good enough now, I can uncheck here, click set, and it goes back to normal. Once I uncheck it, it's still going to put that original setting back in, and we're going to be back to normal here. On the topic of settings, one of the options that you can get added on to your Priva Office is our settings management feature. That's going to be valid for Connext. If I go to our Save Settings page, what it'll allow me to do is it'll allow me to save a group of settings. So if I said, okay, I have a certain crop right now, let's say summer 2023, I can put a crop in tomato. And then when I say save, it's going to bring me up options of all of the possible settings that I can save here. So I have air circulation, air treatment. What I can do here is I can check what I want to save. I can open up the specific pages here, and I can choose which ones I want. Keep in mind when you're saving these settings, the more settings you save, the longer it's going to take. Lots of information here. Just as an example, I'm going to change this to save only my air circulation strategy #1 page. Once I click save, it's going to show me how many settings I'm saving. So 212 settings with that one page. And then I can click finish here. Then what it's going to do is under my settings management tab again, I can go back to manage settings. Looks like I have a lot of different settings groups changed. If I wanted to go back and view those settings, I can highlight the one I want to open, click open. I can actually open up that settings page here and view the different pages that I've saved. So I-190, I can see what all my settings are here. I-190.1, I can do the same. I-190.2. Once I close that, I can select restore. If I said, okay, yeah, these settings are good, this is kind of nice too, because if you just wanted to check what your settings were previously, you can look back here. And then if I say, okay, yeah, I've planted that same crop, I want to put the same settings in, I can click restore here. And then what it's going to do is it's going to bring me again to a confirmation page, and it's going to say, okay, number of settings. It's going to show me a rundown of what's happened. So 212 settings from the set of settings. 212 settings will not be restored, of course, because I just made that backup now because the settings have not changed. So 0 settings have restored. So it kind of gives you a nice confirmation screen to show you exactly what you're changing as well. So once you're happy with that, you can say finish, and then we're all done. If we went back and say, okay, at winter 2022, we can open this one. We have a lot more settings changed on this one. We can go back and see. If we decide we don't want that one anymore, we can click delete, and then it's going to get rid of that one. If I go back to one of my settings pages here, there is a couple options that I can do as far as modifying the pages. So I'm going to go back to my heating strategy. Every once in a while, I'll get a request from a grower and they'll say, yeah, I'm new to Priva. I just want to get used to using the system. I want to make it as simple as possible. How do I clean this page up a little bit? Along our toolbar at the top, there is a button that says customize this screen. Once I click on that, it'll bring up check marks for all of my lines here. And what I'm able to do there is say the customer wanted to just have a heating temperature and their time cool down, time heat up. And they wanted to get rid of a lot of these influences here because they're not using them currently. I'm going to uncheck some of these lines. Then once I save it, it's going to clean that page up nice. So I'm just going to have my heating temperature, my time cool down, my time heat up. And then what it's going to do is it's going to indicate that the screen's been changed with a little star at the top here. With that star, it's going to show an explanation that the screen's been changed. So the screen does not show all the lines that can be changed with the screen customizer. Then say the grower has been using the system for a while and they say, hey, yeah, I want to add a radiation influence in. What they can do is they can just go back to customize this screen. Then I can say radiation to heating adjustment. I'm going to add that back in. Again, click save. It's going to add that line back in. And then if I wanted to add them all back in, again, I can just go back. I can use this one here, and it's going to add all those lines back in for me. So now we're back to normal. Our little asterisk is gone because that's the full page that we're looking at, and we're back to the start. Another request that I get, probably the best one that I can think of is irrigation. If you're setting your start strategies up, your valve groups, your recipes up, I get a request quite a bit to be able to combine those pages. With the button beside customize the screen, we can make a composite screen. What the composite screen editor does is when we click on create a composite screen, it's going to bring up on the left our composite screen editor. Then I can choose a couple different options here. So I-110 heating strategy. The title that shows up here is going to be the title that's on the right side here. So say I wanted to make a combined irrigation page. I can go to my irrigation start strategy. Say I wanted to use start number 1. Then on the left here, I-400, I start strategy start 1. I can say add selected. Again, it's going to give me the ability to kind of hide settings if I wanted to. But in this case, I'm going to say, okay, let's keep everything. And then if I wanted to add my valve groups as well, I can say valve group 1. Again, bring it up on the right here. I'm going to have I-401, add selected. What it's going to do is it's going to add it to the bottom, valve group 1. And then say I wanted to use recipe number 1 we're going to say I403, go to our recipe page, and then recipe number 1, I can add that as well. Add selected. And then let's say I wanted to add a graph as well. I can say add an empty graph, add selected. Now I have all my pages with the graph at the bottom. I can go through and say, I need to put a title in. I'm going to say combined irrigation zone 1. Click save. If I get rid of the screen on the right, now what it's going to show me is I'm going to have all of my settings here. I find this is very useful because, yeah, you have your phases here. The phases refer to the valve group, so you have it all on one page. And then also down here, recipes, you can see the recipes. You can add whatever else you want to. So if you wanted to add some more stuff to this page, I can go back to the composite screen editor. Sorry, I can go back to, go to custom here, composite screens, combined irrigation zone 1. I'm actually going to click customize the screen. Going to bring this back up. Say I wanted to add my valve settings here. I can click here. Again, I can add those to the bottom. If I wanted to rearrange, I can do that as well. By using these arrows, I can bump maybe the recipe settings up. Click save again. And then I'm always able to add it or find it in the composite screen page. Combined irrigation zone 1. Here it is. And then if I want, I can add a shortcut to the top using our shortcut button. So once I add a shortcut button here, I'm going to have all my shortcuts up the top here. If I wanted to rename that, I can click, right click on there, change shortcuts. Then I can say rename irrigation page 1. I can rearrange that as well by using these arrows if I wanted to change the order. Click OK, and then all my shortcuts are at the top here. So I can flip through, go through to my different pages. And then find my combined irrigation page. Next topic I wanted to look at is our graphs. I'm sure a lot of people use the graphs daily. On this test system here, we do have a couple weather stations. So I'm going to bring up our weather station graph. If I wanted to look at just today, this is an example of having all the information squished together. We'll hit that in a second. But if I wanted to look just today, I can right click and choose time graph properties. And then I want to select today only. I can choose my interval type and my step size. Once I click apply, it's going to arrange my graph accordingly. There's a couple things I can do on the graphs. So there is our time graph properties button. I have our magnifying glass. So if I wanted to magnify and zoom in a little bit more to the information that I'm looking at, I can pull down from the top left to bottom right. If I go the opposite way, bottom right to top left, I zoom back out. There is a hand here. So if I wanted to scroll back and forth manually using a drag function, I can do that. If I wanted to look at a specific piece of information, I can use the crosshairs here and scroll through. When I use the crosshairs, if you look down at our legend here, it's going to show a value. So it's going to show exactly what's showing at whatever time I have here. So as I scroll back and forth, it's going to show my time. I can use my arrow keys to go back and forth using that step size. If I wanted to look back and see the past week. And then to add, edit, and remove information, I can use these 3 buttons. So if I wanted to add something on here, say compartment 1 temperature, I can click on our green plus sign, type in compartment 1. And let's say I wanted to look for greenhouse temperature. I can highlight that, click apply. It's going to add that information. If I wanted to edit a piece of information, I can click here, whatever piece I wanted to edit, and I say, okay, yeah, I wanted to change that to humidity. I can go through, uncheck, and then I can go humidity. And then if I wanted to get rid of that piece of information altogether, I can highlight it down here, click the X, and then it gets rid of that information.
Chris, we just have another question.
Sure.
The page that removes the unused lines, the ones that are not being used, where can they locate it? They're just not seeing it available on their tools in either browser.
Oh, that's a great question, actually. If you go to View, and then you go to Toolbar, sometimes what happens is somebody might uncheck one of these functions by accident. So I believe that one is Adjust Screen. So if I uncheck that one, I can go to my toolbar and I see that Adjust Screen doesn't have a check mark there. Once I check it, it should show up there. I notice that every once in a while if somebody's clicking really quickly, or if there's something on there that you don't really use that you wanted to get rid of, you can uncheck it and it makes the toolbar a little bit cleaner. So most likely that's probably where it is. So you just have to go to View, Toolbar, and Screen Functions, or yeah, whichever one you're missing, just check it back and it should add it back to the toolbar. What I can also do with the graphs is I have a couple options here. So I can show a min range, a max range. What that'll do is it'll allow me to change my range along the side here. If I wanted to look at outside temperature, yeah, in Canada, it gets nice and cold in the winter, so our minimum range 0 might not be acceptable. So what I can do is I can change that range and I can put in -20, and then it's going to show the range here. Same thing with radiation. If I'm going above whatever range I have here, I can adjust it if I want. One thing to keep in mind for the min range and the max range is every once in a while I'll get a call and there'll be an end user saying, yeah, my graphs don't look quite right. If I look here, this is a kind of a good example of it. I have highlighted my radiation. It's going to use a range of 0 to 1500. If I look on my graph here, I have 0 to 1500. Just going to click away here. We are moving the graph by hand. So it'll show up here. Yeah, 0 to 1500. Then if we look at the red line, then they're going to say, okay, yeah, the red line, that's really strange. It shows that the temperature was 700 Celsius. But in reality, you just have to click your outside temperature here and it's going to show the proper range. That's kind of an extreme example, 1500. Yeah, of course, it's not going to be 700, but you can trick yourself sometimes, but by saying, okay, if set temperature is 0 to 35, if I highlight that one, yeah, it's going to show my temperature as 16 here, when in reality, it was around 11. That's one thing to keep in mind. It's always going to take on the min range and max range of whatever piece of data that you have highlighted. Also, the information that we have here at the bottom is we're going to see the units. We're going to show a min, max, and average. That min, max, and average, what it'll do is it'll show the min, max, and average of anything that you have active on that screen. So if I decide that I wanted to look at the last week of data, I can right-click again, and I can say time graph properties. And if I wanted to look back to past Wednesday, 7th, and I want my end date to be today. So if I have last 7 days, I click apply, then okay. What it's going to show me is it's going to show me a min, max, and average for the last 7 days. If I move the graph, you'll notice that this information is changing as I go. And then of course, if I wanted to do something extreme, I wanted to look at the last month and get a snapshot of, let's say back to the 3rd, I can do that as well, time graph properties again. So right click, and then I can say apply. And then at the bottom here, it's going to show me a min, max, and average as well. If I wanted to take quite a bit of information. So if I wanted to look and say, okay, let's look back to February 1st, I can do that. I can click apply. Again, this information that shows up on here, it's kind of squished. You can't really do too much. You can zoom in if you wanted to. But if I wanted to take that information and export it to Excel, all I need to do is right click, say export graph lines. I can choose my intervals. So it's going to allow me to do 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30, 1 hour, and so on. Let's do 5 minutes for now. I can choose a location for it. So right now I'm going to save it just to my desktop here. I'm going to give a title, weather, info. I'm going to click save and then export. Keep in mind here, yeah, if you're exporting the last 2 years of data, it'll take a little bit of time to export that information. What it's going to do is it's going to export a file for me, and that's going to be in a CSV format. What I can do with that, if I open it just as is, it is not going to make too much sense. So I need a little bit of formatting here. So what I can do is I can say, I'm going to go to File, I'm going to open up a new workbook. And then what I will do is I'll go to the Data tab, and then I'll say Get External Data. And then I'm going to say From Text. And I'm going to find my file here and then import it. And then I just need a little bit of formatting here. I'm going to add a semicolon, comma, and space. Click Next, and then Finish. And then find a square to plot it in. And then I'm going to have all that information here. So my 5-minute intervals are along the left-hand side here. So my first date is February 1st at midnight. And then it's going to show me 5-minute intervals of all of that information. So show my information down. It's going to show my headings along the top. And then I can take that information, feed it into a graph or any other data collection service if I wanted to just keep it as records. That's kind of a nice thing to have. Then I can close this and come back to Priva Office. Another thing I wanted to touch on is our reporting. Like the settings management, that's an add-on to Priva Office. With the reports, what they are is it's pre-populated reports. So example, if I go to my compartment report, you'll find it under overviews and then reports. What that'll allow me to do is export reports from Priva Office, and all of that, again, is pre-populated data. I can do a couple things with it. So if I wanted to look back at last week, I can go to week 23, starting June 5th. I can look at the year. Again, once you have the reporting function in Priva Office, it's going to start storing reports from that day forward. So if I wanted to go back really far in view, I can do that. I can choose my compartment. I'm just going to choose compartment 1 here, and then I can say calculate. Then what it's going to do is it's going to populate this report for me. So it's going to show me outside conditions. It's going to show me our climate conditions inside. It's going to show us day, night, 24-hour. It's going to show us our average, highest, lowest, lots and lots of information here. And then it's going to summarize for the week as well. So temperature, humidity, relative humidity, humidity deficit, absolute humidity, and so on. Lots and lots of information here. As I scroll down, that's per compartment. What I can also do is I can go to overviews, reports. Another nice one that I really like is our valves report. So if I go through, again, look here for the week. I don't have any reports for that one. Let's go back. Calculate. Shows me lots of information here as well. This one's really useful for irrigation as well. So it looks at the different valves. It shows our average EC, pH, what that valve is consumed in liters. If you're using a dripper system, it'll show you per unit how many milliliters each of those drippers has consumed. Liters per meter squared. It's going to show a flow as well. So cubic meters per hour. It's going to show an average per the valve. And then it's going to also show us the deviation as well. The nice thing about having the deviation is it'll help you kind of troubleshoot issues in the crop, issues in the installation. So if you notice that a certain section of plants is maybe getting a little bit smaller than the other ones, you can come to this report and say, okay, yeah, this is my average flow. Then it's going to show me a deviation as well. What the deviation is going to show me is that when we put all the information in for an irrigation valve running and we say, okay, we're expecting this valve to run at 4 meters cubed per hour, and maybe we're only getting 3, it's going to show us a deviation here between the calculated and the measured. So we can say, okay, yeah, that valve got 25% less water than it should have. It's going to show a minus or a positive. So it's going to show if it got more or less. And then that kind of helps troubleshoot the crop. Again, like I said, if you notice something in the crop that some of the plants are not getting enough water, too much water, and then it'll also help you find leaks. So if there's a leak in the system, then maybe your flow is too high. Maybe you have a sticky valve and the valve isn't opening properly. It'll show you information like that as well. So this is very useful. Have all that information.
Chris, we
Yep,
just
go
have
ahead.
another question.
Sure.
So in regards to the graphs, I know Grodan sensors can send information to Priva. Could we make
Yep.
a graph on Priva reflecting that data? Note they have not combined Grodan and Priva, but they're exploring that potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Typically the Grodan sensors, the one that I see most often is the temperature, moisture content, and EC. We actually have a module. Let me just see if I have that in this system. Again, this is our test system, so let's see here. We have our substrate measurements here. Yeah, a good example will be here. It'll show up here. So it'll show substrate measurement 1, for example, here. That's got measurements for average EC, moisture, and temperature. All of those values can be graphed. So in the system for the graphs, a lot of the pages have tab graphs up at the top here. And you can go, and it has a title on there of whatever page you're coming off of. We also have our graph menu here that you can go through. And you'll have different categories. All of these come blank originally, and you can put on whatever information you have on here. So you can add all of that information. So short answer, kind of a long answer to the short question is yes, 100%. You can graph that information for the Grodan sensors, as well as any other value in Priva Office. Just to check back on the reports again, yeah, climate report, lighting report. Lighting report's nice because it'll show information. If I wanted to go back to week 21, let's say, oh, there's no reports there. That lighting report will show you information on how long your lights have run. So it'll get you an idea of burn time on your bulbs. And then also we have information for the water system as well. So if you wanted a full water report, do we have any data here? Yeah. So it'll show you per water system consumed for the entire water system. The dosing channel one is nice as well because it'll show you a value on how much each dosing channel is pumping out. So if you wanted to keep track, calculated value of your fertilizer used, you can use that on here. It'll show you runtime of the pumps, if there's a dosing pump as well, Vilux information, start program information, lots and lots of stuff in here. What you can do with these reports is you can export them. What it's going to do is it's going to export to a CSV. You can save them as well. And when you click save, it's going to save it as a PDF. And then you have an option to email as well. If you wanted to email this report right away, you can choose the format, CSV or PDF. Select the email address, click close. Or another option you can use is our automatic action. So if we click here on our automatic action, what we can do is we can put a description here of that automatic action. So let's say emailing report for water. We can choose a target. So printer, not used too much anymore, but you can have it print to a printer if there's a printer tied to the server, or you can email it as well. What you can do with the emails, you can choose the frequency of the email. So you can say, we'll do it once, we'll do it daily, weekly. If we wanted to say, okay, we'll email it let's say 8 a.m. every Monday. We can choose the type of report, period, quarter, year, week. Sometimes people will ask and they'll say, okay, every Monday I want my weekly report. Then I can choose an email as well. I can type in the email that I want to email it to and then choose the format. And then once I click OK, it's going to show me that it hasn't been configured yet, but I can show you where. So what it's going to do once you click OK is it's going to start emailing every Monday at 8 a.m. In order to set that up, you need to go to General, usually with your IT provider, and then you can go to Configuration, Priva Office, then go to Reporting Settings, and then have your IT fill out our reporting settings configuration. So it needs a mail server, email sender, port number, username, and password. Once that's all filled out, then you're able to send those reports at the frequency that you want to. Next thing I wanted to touch on was our settings graphs. Up at the top, I can show again here, there is an icon for settings graphs. And what the settings graphs allow you to do is it gives you a visual look at your settings. So when you load it, what it's going to do is it's going to take all your settings and put it in a graphical form. You're able to do your heating and ventilation, your pipe strategy, vent strategy, air treatment, and humidification. I can configure my graphs how they show up here. And then what I can do on here as well is I can manually move my set points here. So if I wanted to set something up, I have here, I can change my time cool down here, pull that information for the time. And as I'm adjusting it here, what it'll do is it'll adjust these settings down here at the bottom as well. I can look at my influences. And then once I'm happy with that, I can click Apply Settings here. As I'm moving the information on this graph, I can move it as much as I want, and it's not going to save anything until I actually go to Apply Settings here. So that's kind of nice. If I wanted to add a period, I can right click, add a period as well, change the start time, change my ramp times here, and so on. Then once I'm happy with it, I can click Apply Settings. I can choose the compartments that I want to put it in here, and then I can choose if I want to have a delay or not. Same thing for the pipe strategy. If I wanted to look at my heating pipes, I can do that here. Again, if I switch graphs here, it'll ask me if I wanted to save change settings. If I say no, then it'll just keep everything how it was. Same thing here. Min, max, water temp. I can make all my settings here. And then when I'm happy, I can click apply. Apply settings. Takes that information, puts it into my settings. And then when I go to my pipe strategy, all that information is going to be here for me. So I have all my information there now. Next thing I wanted to look at is our connecting influences. If you notice, especially in the later versions, there's lots and lots of extra influences here. There's a couple different ways to access them. If I see an extra influence here and I wanted to adjust the max water temp, I can use this influence. Typically, if people are looking to use the extra influences, I'll recommend to make sure that there's no stock influences there. So if somebody says, okay, I want to use a radiation adjustment, yeah, of course it doesn't make sense because this setting's already here. But if they come up with another idea, say outside temperature, what I can do is I can say extra influence. I can click on that. It's going to bring me to our connecting influences page. And the nice thing about clicking off of the main settings page is it'll fill out our left side here. So it's going to show what we're influencing. And then on the right side here, we can say what it's influenced by. So if I wanted to look for outside temperature, I can select that. And then I can say adjust. It's going to say, do you want to replace the current influence with this influence? Okay. And then once I go back to my pipe settings, I have my extra influence here. I can click on it, and now I have it linked to my outside temperature. I can fill out my table here, use that as an influence, and then it'll take effect immediately. I can do the same thing with my minimum water temp. If I have something else that I wanted to look at, lots and lots of options along the left-hand side here that you can change, and then also lots of influences that you can look at. If I go back and I decide that I don't want to use that one anymore, I can click on it again, scroll up to the top, click the dashed line here, say adjust, then click OK. And then once I go back to my extra influence, it's grayed out here, meaning that it's not linked to anything. So it won't be active until I link anything to it. Just a couple more topics that I wanted to touch on before we look at some questions. Next one is another option for Priva Office. I find in certain areas, growers say that they want to kind of be ahead of any storms coming in. We do have an option in Priva Office called our rain radar. What our rain radar does is it gives us a satellite view of the rain. Again, this is used for Connext. And it gives us some precipitation settings or protection settings. So once we configure it, it's configured to where our office is. And you can see it looks a little bit rainy there. It's going to give us a scale along the bottom, and it's going to give us an example. So 0.1 millimeters per hour up to more than 30. When I open our protection settings, it's going to give me three options here. It's going to give you a precipitation alarm, protection phase 1, and then protection phase 2. Precipitation alarm, that's more of an alarm notification to tell you that a storm is coming. It won't take any action on the greenhouse. I can choose a time window, and then I can choose an intensity. So I can say if I have a storm that looks like it's going to be 3 millimeters an hour within 90 minutes, give me an alarm. Once I check that, it's going to show up as an alarm here. It's showing some alarms here now because it looks like it's fairly rainy at the office. And then I have protection phase 1 and protection phase 2 as well. So as the storm gets closer, you can do something like this. We wanted to just stick with 3 millimeters an hour. I can enter in a dead band for it turning on and off. And then I can set a time window as well. So 20 minutes, 10 minutes. Once I click apply, it's going to take those settings. And then I can actually use those settings to preemptively close my vents or close my curtains. So if I wanted to look at my curtain settings, I can go to my curtain control page. So climate and then curtain control. And I have two new settings here at the bottom. So I have max curtain position rainfall radar phase 1 and then phase 2. So if I said, okay, if the storm's within 20 minutes and I wanted to start uncovering, I can put a set point in here. We're going to say, okay, if the storm's within 20 minutes, open the curtain to 50%. And if I say, okay, yeah, if the storm's within 10 minutes, I want to uncover completely, I can put 0. And then whatever phase that storm protection or the rain protection is in, the curtain's going to take on a new maximum position. That is for the curtain. And then you can do it for the vents as well for lee or wind side. So same thing, storms coming. Depending on the installation, I get a lot of requests for the rain radar. If you have a big opening event that takes a really long time to close, whether it's a continuous vent that opens the entirety of the greenhouse, or a good example too is we get a lot of requests from MX greenhouses that they say, okay, yeah, open, close to fully open to fully closed, the vents take 15 minutes. So if I get a quick storm, it takes a really long time. I can do the same thing here. So I have my phase 1, phase 2. I can say, okay, if I hit phase 1, limit the vents down to a maximum of 50. And then if I hit phase 2, yeah, let's go to 10. And then also you have your other limitations here as well, as far as storm goes, or wind, and then also wind with rain. So those will override those as well. But the rain radar kind of helps you preemptively close that, so you're not panicking when the storm comes in quickly and starts raining.
So we do have some more questions, Chris, and I have to say, just looking at the weather radar there, it looks like it is pretty close. I can see the storm starting to roll in here at the office, so
Perfect
that's
timing
pretty
for the
good.
example. Sometimes I
Although I
explain and
wish,
I say, oh, you have to trust me. It comes in with the rain, yeah.
I promise, yeah. So the first question we have is, how do we link a setting that is not directly influenced by another setting?
Can we get a little bit of more of an explanation on that one? So a setting that's not linked to another setting?
Renato, I believe that was your question. If you're able to drop a little more details in the chat there so that Chris can answer that question for you.
So if something's not linked, all you need to do is just click on the wrench here. But maybe Renato means if there's a setting that's not an option in Priva Office already. Kind of to touch on that, like we've adjusted, made extra influences for certain settings, like adjustment heating. If we look at the pipe temperature, we're going to have one for the pipe temperature as well. Your vents, you have a min and max. I'm hiding these right now. So if I go here, I can add them back in. And yeah, there's an adjustment ventilation here for ventilation temperature. Also with your min and max vents as well. In saying that, there is another program called, which I think Renato might be talking about. There is another program called a corrections program. And the corrections program is very nice as well, and it gives us a little bit more flexibility. There is a little bit of extra configuration that needs to be done in the background, but what we can do is say Renato gives me a call and says, hey, Chris, there's an influence I want to use on this setting, but I can't find it in the extra influences. Most of the settings pages has what we call corrections as well. So yeah, we have it for the vents, we have it for the pipes as well. And what that does is it allows us to expand on the extra influences. And again, a little bit of information as far as configuration goes that needs to be done in the background. So if you ever find yourself in a situation, any of the people in this meeting that you have an influence that you want to use on a certain setting and you can't find it as a stock setting, yeah, just give us a call and there's a good chance that we'll be able to put it in for you.
We just got some more details. So Renato says, for instance, you can link heating temperature and watts, however, not light status according to shade position. Not sure if that helps a little bit better there for you, Chris.
Yeah. So Renato, for that one, that would be another. Yeah, you just give us a call and then we can use the corrections program and look at a light status. So yeah, if we're looking at the curtains. Yeah, I would have to do a little bit of correction on the inside, but I can use the curtain control and I can use, I have an external position. So if I wanted to say close the curtains or open the curtains when the lights are on, we can do that as well. No problem. I would say to Renato, just give me a call.
Perfect. So the other question we have is from Alexander. It says, hi, Chris. I was looking through the graphs tab to default graphs, then to climate and heat temp, heating all compartments. It shows grid lines for different climate periods. Is it possible to create this on our own?
As far as like a customized graph, yeah, you can create your own graph. So you can use any of these stock ones as well. So lots and lots of graphs. If we look through the default graphs, heat temp, heating all compartments. When the system gets installed, all of these graphs come blank. So you can put whatever you want on these graphs. So if it's a heating all compartments tab, yeah, you can put anything you want. You can stick with the title and put only heating information on there. Or if you wanted to, you can put, yeah, it doesn't matter, irrigation information. You can use any of those graphs for anything. Another thing to touch on the graphs as well, which can be a little bit, well, can be a lot helpful, is say we go to a graph and we have two different compartments and we want to make a graph for both compartments, but we want to have the same information on there. What I can do is I can go to my graph tab. Say I have certain information that I wanted to copy to both graphs. What I can do is maybe not every compartment's the same, but any of this information that's applicable for the other graph is I can make up a graph here, and then I have a copy settings or a copy graph as well. So if I click on that, it's going to ask me what information I want to copy. Say I wanted to copy it to compartment 2, and I want to make the exact same graph with the exact same colors, the exact same min max. I can say copy, click OK. And then what it's going to do for me is it's going to make one under number 2, but it's going to take those information points and steal the information points from compartment 2. So now I have an identical graph using compartment 1, compartment 2. If for whatever reason you run out of graphs, there is an option that you can do as well to create your own custom graph. So if Alexander wants to make his own graph, I can go into our systems management. Again, here's my user. It's under the user role demo. So what I can do is I can go to my user roles, find the user role that I'm attached to, right click, and I can go back to the navigation menu editor, find a spot to put it. Typically, I'll put it under custom. I have a spot for Chris's graphs here. If I wanted to make my own graph, I can click new screen. I can put a title in, so I can say Chris's heating graph. Under template, I can choose a graph template. I can click OK, and then click save. And then what I can do is under Chris's graph, I just need to click on another page to refresh the screen. I can find my screen down here, Chris's heating graph, and then I can create my own graph with whatever I want on there. So I can go through, I could put a maximum of 20 lines per graph. So I can set through and choose any information that I want on here. So if I just made a vent temp, heat temp, greenhouse temp, click apply, and I'm off and running with my own graph. Hopefully that answers the question. That was it for rain radar. And I only have one more thing that I wanted to show before we open it up to everybody. Another request I get is that some users want to have more than one screen open. So say I have one window open here, I wanted to have another one. There is a trick I can use. So if I minimize this one, I can click on another instance of Priva Office and then log in again. Then what I can do with this is I can put one on one side and then one on the other. And then what I can do with that is say I wanted to look at my water system status and maybe my recipe settings at the same time. I can do that here. In order to open up more than one instance of Priva Office, what I can do is I can go to the Priva Office shortcut on my desktop, right click, say properties. At the end of my target, what I'm going to do is put a space, and then I'm going to say multi-client on the end. Once I have that in there, it's going to allow me to open up two different instances of Priva Office at the same time. So sometimes if the users have nice big monitor that they can fit 2 windows on, or 2 different monitors, we can do that. And we can have 2 instances of Priva Office running. Nice for looking at 2 different settings pages, 2 different status pages, or if you have more than one computer, more than one Priva Office server, you can log in and have 2 different windows open. That's about it as far as I had prepared for everybody. So if there's any other questions, we can look at that.
Feel free if you have any questions for Chris, throw it in the chat, or feel free unmute yourself and ask the question away as well.
Yeah,
We do,
absolutely. To show again, I can right click and then go to properties. How it's going to show up is it'll show up just like this. It'll show a target for our Priva Office. So it'll just show up here. And then I'm going to type in dash multi-client. And then all I have to do is click apply and then okay. And then you're good to go.
we do have another question as well. How do you set an alarm for max rest time in irrigation?
Max rest time in irrigation. So I'm assuming that's going to be a situation where if a valve hasn't run for a certain amount of time. I would say the best way to do that, there's not a specific alarm for max rest time, but on your irrigation strategy, I always recommend if people have an irrigation strategy in automatic and you have your max rest time set, then what you can do is, I imagine it's a situation where a valve is rested too long. What I would say to do is have a maximum rest time set. In this example, it's 3 hours. And then what you can do is you can go to your valve settings. And then I can go to installation. That's not showing me on my installation tab, but make sure that your flow control is set on. So if it's attached to water system 1, we have a flow margin and flow monitoring. What we can say is, okay, I'm going to turn the flow monitoring on. If I have a flow margin that's low or high by 15% for more than 1 minute, I'm going to send an alarm, and that's going to be a good indicator if a valve is not running. That's probably the best way to do it. But of course, the way to do that is that, yeah, you'll need a flow sensor to measure your flow.
Just a little more context. We just got some more context for that question, Chris. They mean, is it possible to set a time where you cannot set max time more than that set amount of time? For example, if you set 2 hours, then another user cannot set max time more than 2 hours. They can set anywhere between 1 minute to 2 hours.
No, short answer is no. What you can do is what I said earlier with the users. If you're a little bit nervous about having certain people change things, you can make a different user that'll be read-only, but there's no specific set point to change the maximum rest time limit.
Another question that we got through is from Kevin. He says, "Hi, Chris. Proper replacement intervals for pH probes. What to troubleshoot for calibration if false readings occur?"
Main thing for the pH sensors, I'm just going to open up the manual here. In the manual, as far as maintenance goes, there's a recommendation. Yeah, to guarantee an accurate measurement, you must calibrate the sensor once every 2 weeks or as often as prescribed for the installation in which the acidity measurement takes place. My recommendation to growers with the pH sensors, pH and EC, for pH sensors specifically, they do require calibration. I would stick with the recommendation in the manual, so once every 2 weeks. But I also recommend for growers to have their own handheld pH and EC meter. Typically that's, yeah, before I even ask, that's on site. The reason for that is you have control over your pH sensor, your EC sensor, and you're always able to check and verify that your sensors on the system are reading the same as your handheld sensor. As far as troubleshooting goes, the best thing to do is in the background when everything's set up, we go through calibration with you. Most installations we recommend on the Priva installations, whether it's a NutriJet, NutriFlex, NutriFit, any of our installations, we provide 2 of every sensor. The reason for that is we'll have a sensor to control off of and a sensor to verify off of. And then internally in the configuration settings, we can set a number to say, okay, if these sensors drift more than 2.2 pH apart, then we know that one is wrong, potentially drifting off, needs recalibration. Same with the EC sensors. The EC sensors don't necessarily need calibration. They're factory calibrated, and they're also calibrated when the system's installed. Number one thing with the EC sensors is just to make sure that they're clean. Depending on fertilizer, depending on acid, depending on additives, those sensors can get dirty. Of course, with electrical conductivity, we're measuring the salt content in the water. If the probes on the inside get corroded, what can happen is that electrical conductivity measurement starts to not read as well. So I recommend, yeah, every couple weeks. It always varies with different growers depending on what they're using to make sure that those sensors are cleaned. As far as things to watch out for, yeah, when you're checking pH sensors with your calibration fluid, you'll have an idea of what you should be reading. Number one thing with pH sensors is never let them dry out. There is a membrane on the end of them, and if the sensors are left dry or not in a solution, then they can dry out and then your measurement will stop working.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Chris. So we've got a few more questions piling up here, which is great.
Sure.
So if you send in a question, we will get to them. So the next question is from Alexander. Chris, could you possibly run through how to use the alarm settings on I411.3?
I411.3. I'm going to have to look on my terminal here to remind myself what. Alarm limit. Alarm limit, which alarm water per irrigation radiation is too low triggered. And water per radiation sum, the quantity of radiation sum determined over the last 3 irrigation cycles. I don't use these ones too much. Let me check the unit here. Yeah, it gives you a too low alarm and a message as well. So if you have a too low, it's going to send an alarm for the low alarm and the message alarm. And then it's also going to show high for a message and high alarm. What it's going to do is it's going to measure over the last 3 irrigations, and it's going to give you a value of milliliters per millijoule. So what you can do here is over the last 3 irrigations, if you want to set an alarm or a message, you can set that low or you can set that high. My best recommendation for this one, again, I don't use it too much. I haven't got that request a lot, but as the irrigation cycles go throughout the day, of course, we're going to show 0 here because we're not irrigating on this test system, but I would graph this information. So if I go to that information in Priva Office, right click and say store data, and then I can make a graph and put that on there, and then just view the information over the next few days. And then I'll be able to set my alarm limit. So what it's going to do is it's going to give you a message on your I411.3 page. It'll show a red box over your measurement on here. And then on the alarm page, if you go beyond that limit, it'll show alarm limit 789 water irrigation per radiation too low, and then 788 if you're too high. So yeah, it is the number of milliliters per millijoule over the last 3 irrigations. So you'll be able to fill that out accordingly.
Not sure if this helps, Chris. It's a little more context as well.
Yep.
Ideally, they're looking to trigger an alarm if there was water active during their night period. So perhaps there's a better option than that module.
Yeah, again, with a flow sensor, if you're graphing your flow sensor, that's probably the best way, and then you'll be able to see if there's information. There's not an alarm as far as flow during the night, but we could put one in as a custom alarm as well. Yeah, Alexander can give me a call and we can look at that together. But yeah, it is possible.
Okay, perfect. Next question we have is from Rachel. So on the Priva Office that they're using, for some reason now when they go into any graph and click add a line, nothing shows up, even when they're putting in a compartment number into the search. Is there a trick to this? It used to work just as you showed, but now nothing appears on any graph that they choose when they try to add lines.
Yeah, my guess is that there's something going on with that Priva Office. One thing for Rachel to check is, for everybody to check actually, is there's a couple icons when you install Priva Office onto, Priva Office server onto a system. The 3 icons, I don't know if you can see the screen here, a system viewer, and then background process manager, and then there's one that's called PTP, but it shows active here. I would guess for Rachel that maybe the system viewer is not white like it's shown here. If there's ever an issue with Priva Office, this one tends to turn pink or red. It's like a pinkish red color. And then when you click on it, you can double click and it's going to show you all the services that Priva Office is running. So usually if there is something that is not running, it will not show up with green check marks here. It'll show up with a red X. And my guess for Rachel is, yeah, there's something going on with the Priva Office. And in that case, I just recommend to call our help desk, and then somebody can log in and give Rachel a hand. But yeah, the only other reason, Rachel did say it was working before, so I don't see any other reason why you wouldn't be able to find things on here. But yeah, Rachel can give us a call, and yeah, it's a good note to anybody else that if you see that this Priva Office system viewer on the Priva Office server is red, then best to give us a call because there is some sort of issue. Could mean that the graphs aren't showing up, could mean that you're not able to log in. And typically what that is associated with is for your Priva Office server, it's always best to have Priva Office server on a UPS, so an uninterruptible power supply. What that's good for is if there's any power flickers in the facility, depending on the location that you're in, it helps filter out those things. So if you lose power very briefly, the power supply kicks in, and then it prevents the computer from going off. The way that the system works is that it's constantly taking that information. It's about every minute that it'll sample information, and if for whatever reason Priva Office is in the middle of handling some of that data that it's graphing, and the power goes off on the computer abruptly, same thing as a lot of programs, has a potential of corrupting that data. So if you have a UPS on the system, it'll help prevent against that stuff. Also, if you're in a situation where you lose power for an extended period of time, a lot of those UPSs, the way it'll work is that the UPS senses that there is no power. It's going to keep it on battery. And if it starts running out of battery, it'll shut the PC off in a controlled manner, and it'll prevent instances like corrupt data from happening. So number one recommendation for Priva Office Server is have it on a UPS just to avoid a lot of those issues. The only other time we see issues with Priva Office is a little bit out of our control, and it's typically when Windows decides to do updates. So they have their day, for Microsoft has their day to do updates. When the updates come out, there's typically the ability to schedule in Windows when those updates happen. And my recommendation usually is to have it scheduled earlier in the week, kind of during working hours. So if you guys ever have an issue, then you can give us a call and say, hey, there is an issue with my Priva Office. In saying that, talking about corrupt data and issues with Priva Office, under our general menu and system management, there is a screen for backup settings, and you're able to save backups in two different locations. So we have the daily backup and we have a user backup. There's a selection for both, number of backups to save. Right now, with it selected being selected on 10, what that's going to do is it's going to save the last 10 days of data. So what it's going to do, sorry, I shouldn't say last 10 days of data, it's going to be the last 10 backups. So it's going to store a backup tonight. It's going to store a backup for the next 10 days. On the 11th day, what it's going to do is it's going to delete the oldest backup, and then it's going to store another one. So it's always going to keep the last 10 days of backups. That's kind of nice. I mentioned about having this, keeping an eye on this little icon here. If it turns red and there's an issue with the graphs, sometimes what happens is a grower will log in and see, okay, my graphs aren't working, but I'm really busy. I'm not going to call. Yeah, say they have their backup set on 3. They're only saving the last 3 days of backups. Sometimes what happens, if there's corrupt information in the database that's causing the system not to work, and you go beyond 3 days, Priva Office is going to make a backup of all that corrupt information, and eventually it's going to erase all of our good backups that we have. So before hard drives were fairly large, we would put this on 3 or put it on a week. But now with the way hard drives are, you can get them as a terabyte, 2 terabytes. You can store 2 weeks of backups and have no problem with hard drive space. So I would say 2 things. Typically, I'll put this on 10, last 10 days of data. And then the other thing is, if you have an issue with Priva Office, don't hesitate to call us, because if you go beyond 10 days, then you have the potential of saving some corrupt information in your graph information. Then if we try to restore that backup, we're just restoring bad information. So sooner the better when you let us know for Priva Office issues.
Awesome. Another question for you, Chris, is from Sergio. They couldn't hear the part too well about the rain radar. Is it supposed to be every previous system that has one, and it has to be active to use it, or do you have to have a sensor included to have it work?
That's a good question. So it's an add-on to Connext. It is an add-on to Priva Office, so it doesn't come standard. It's available for an additional cost. There is no sensor. What the system does is it'll take radar information. Can't remember off the top of my head where the source is, but it's actually taken from a world source of satellite info. So it's fed into the system with no additional sensor needed. But as far as adding it on to your Connext system, you can talk with your Priva partner, and then they can give you a price on it.
Perfect. Next question is from Tyler. If an alarm isn't dealt with, is there a way to get the alarm to go active, to activate again after a certain time? they use an app to get alarm notifications, and multiple notifications for high-risk alarms would be beneficial.
Yeah, typically it depends on how you're handling these alarms. So um, with the alarms that show up in Priva Office, and then specifically we're talking about Connext or Compact CC, we can assign an alarm level to all these alarms. In each of the Priva systems, typically in your CPC panel, in your main panel, you'll have an alarm board. What the alarm board does is there's 4 contacts on it. So you can send an alarm, and what it does is it sends a dry contact. So just a relay contact for alarm level 1, alarm level 2, alarm level 3. And then the 4th contact's for any alarm, send a message out. Typically what people do with these is they'll tie it in with a sensophone, whether it's a dialer or a web-based sensophone, or with their alarm system. If an alarm is sent out and not acknowledged, what'll happen is it'll keep that alarm active. And then there's typically a setting on their dialer. I know Sensophone has one. Some of the alarm systems have it. And what it is that it'll say, okay, if this alarm isn't dealt with within 10 minutes, then have it send out again, and then it'll recall the person. So somebody calls in, acknowledges the alarm, that's done. If the alarm is sent out and it's not acknowledged, there's typically a setting on that alarm dialer to have it repeat and send again, just in case, yeah, I tried to call somebody or send an email or send a text to somebody. I was in the middle of the night and somebody stepped through it. There's usually like a repeat time, and then there's also a hierarchy. So if grower number 1 is on call for that night, grower number 1 doesn't acknowledge the alarm, then it goes on to grower number 2 to grower number 3, and then there's kind of a fail-safe for it. So that's the best option. As long as nobody's come into Priva Office and clicked alarm bell off to acknowledge that alarm, then that alarm contact will stay active, and then it will keep signifying the sensophone to keep calling.
Okay, perfect. The next question we have is from Hector. It says, "Hi, Chris. Is it possible to add calculated variables in the graphs?"
Yeah, absolutely. Each of the settings pages. So let's look at our heating. Each of these settings pages, yeah, you can type in your settings and you can look at and say, okay, heating temperature. Then say I can think of 4 different influences here. I always recommend growers to go to the overview page. On the overview page, it does a great job of explaining what's going on. So I can say, okay, my corrected heating temperature or my set heating temperature is 16.1 as it's in here. Then say I walk out into the greenhouse and I say, oh, it's a little bit too hot, it's a little bit too cold, but I had it set to 16. What's going on here? I can come to my overview and I can see, okay, oh, there's an influence of the radiation here. Yeah, it's only 0.3, so I'm not going to notice too much of a difference. But then sometimes what happens is if growers have an idea of 4 different influences here, and they don't enter them in properly, then what can happen is you can really adjust your temperature. So yeah, you can come here, see how you're influencing, and then you can graph your calculated heating temperature instead. When you right click on a piece of information, as long as it's clicked and it says store data here with a check mark, that means it's being stored from this point forward. If I come to a piece of information and it doesn't have a check mark there, that means it's currently not being stored. Once I click store data here and I have a check mark, usually it takes about a minute or 2 for it to show up in that list. If I want to find that piece of information specifically, if I can't search for it or I'm having trouble finding it, I can right click here and I can say properties, and I can look for the actual name. So calculated heat T is how it's going to show up here. Then I can go to my graph and find it. But short answer is, yeah, you can graph calculated variables and you can go to your overview page, and that's probably the best place to find it. Same with the venting page. If you go to your ventilation strategy, you can go to your overview, and then it's going to show you calculated values. So calculated ventilation temperature leak, calculated wind. If you're using a lagging in there, it's going to show you all that information. So yeah, it kind of can get a little bit confusing if you put in influences, you put laggings in based on your set temperature. If you're just graphing your ventilation temperature, then you might not get an accurate representation of what's going on inside. So always best to graph your calculated values.
Awesome. One last question from what I'm seeing in the chat here is from Brian. It says, my Priva office does not have access to water or climate reports. Am I able to add those reports in via the user roles page?
You should be able to. Let's take a look here. I've never seen that situation, to be honest, but let's take a look here. So if we go in and look at overviews and then go to reports, yeah, I suppose actually, yeah, we could have a situation. So if I go to my overviews and I go to reports, I have these ones active right now. Then if I go to my demo, which I'm logged into currently, and I go to my navigation menu editor, something for Brian to check is go into, the user roles, open up your overviews, open up your reports, and then check in here and see what's going on. So I have a couple other ones here that are not active, for example. So if Brian goes in and finds these that they're not active, I can just uncheck hide in menu, then click save. And then I can hit F5 to refresh. And now I have those active. So possibly, Brian, you're going to log in and go to the user roles and see that those are hidden or not active. Another thing you can check is that if it's been deleted completely from that user role, I can go to my navigation menu editor and say I come into the report screen and I see that it's not there. I can click on the bottom here and I can say source tree and go to my overviews. And the source tree is going to be a list of all of the screens that are available in Priva Office. So potentially, yeah, if somebody's just deleted it from the menu, and I say yes here, I can come back here. So I can say source tree again. I can go to the reports, and then I can add my water report back in, click save, and then go to overviews, reports, and it should be there available to me. If you get through those steps and you still can't find it, again, give our help desk a call and then we can log in with you and take a look.
Fantastic. So are there any further questions at all from anybody who's joined in today?
And if there's any other questions later on down the road, yeah, feel free to reach out to myself or to the help desk, and yeah, don't be afraid to ask any questions or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, perfect. So hopefully we all learned something new and are able to walk away with better understanding of how Priva can help you or your clients kind of optimize your irrigation strategies and how to use Priva Office. We know Chris covered a lot today. Sorry, we got one more question that just came in.
Sure.
What is the help desk contact information?
Yeah. You can type it
Do you
in
have
the
that
chat as
handy?
well, but it's 905-562-7351. And a little bit of information on the help desk. It's open 8:30 to 5 Eastern Standard Time. If there's any situations where you're in need of emergency help, you can dial that same number. So again, 905-562-7351. And if it's after hours, on a weekend, holiday, anything like that, yeah, an emergency, don't be afraid to dial that number and it'll direct you to our pager service, and it'll page one of us, and then you'll usually get back to you in about 10-15 minutes. We can type it in the chat as well and
Perfect. Yeah, that'd be great,
have it in
Chris.
there. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, we know Chris covered a lot today. There will be a recording of today's session available in the Priva Academy starting next week. Feel free to rewatch that for any training purposes. If anyone wanted to revisit some of the topics discussed, or you have any unanswered questions, or just want to chat, please feel free to reach out to us always. We're always happy to connect with our customers and would also appreciate feedback on the live training session. Again, if you have suggestions or certain topics you would like to see covered in future training sessions, please do let us know. You can put that right into the chat and we'll be sure to review those suggestions as well. Chris, is there anything else you'd like to add for today's session?
No, I think that's it. Again, yeah, I can't reaffirm enough. If there's any questions, just let us know. We're always there for you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you again for being here today and supporting Priva, everyone. We wish you all the best for the rest of your week, and we hope to be in touch with you again soon. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.